It feels like forever since Valerie asked me whether I would host the IFLA Media meeting. Yes, yes. And so much has happened since then. But it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the IFLA School Library Section 2022 mid-year meeting at Blanchelande College. So this is a little bit of a strange experience because we have some colleagues who have been able to join us in person. We have many colleagues who haven't been able to join us in person for various reasons. So I know that there are some colleagues who are joining us live because we are streaming this event, I hope. And we are also recording this event, I hope, and we'll make those recordings available afterwards. So I think because we are a relatively small group now, what I will just do is briefly introduce the people who are in the room so that people who are joining us online or the recording know who is here. So just to start, Rob O'Brien is one of the people who wasn't able to be here today, but he has recorded a welcome. But we felt that it was very important for the college to be able to welcome you in person. So I'm very grateful to Michael Fattorini, who is a trustee of the college, who has very kindly stepped in and will briefly welcome you before I share the principal's welcome. We also have the Vice Chair of the UK School Library Association, Ali, who has come over from England, and Alison Tarrant, the Chief Executive of the UK School Library Association, was intending to be here. And as she explains in her very brief welcome to you, which is also recorded, she had a family holiday booked since 2020 that has been postponed and postponed and postponed. So unfortunately, she's not able to join us today, but we have Ali with us. So then also locally, and from the school, we have Hugh Rose, the design director. So I won't say much about you because I will be introducing him shortly for a talk about conceptual design related to the hero's journey and heroic inquiry at Blanchelande College before we do a brief physical tour. Elizabeth Hutchinson, who used to be head of the school's library service in Guernsey, which is based at the Gilorley Public Library, but she is now an independent advisor and trainer for school libraries. But our relationship goes way back, and we still continue on this journey together. So then we have Valerie Glass, who is the chair of the school's library section standing committee, who has come over from France. We have Louisa Marquardt, who is the secretary of the school's library section standing committee, who has joined us from Italy. And then three very robust and brave colleagues who only arrived last night at 9 o'clock, who are with us today. We have Albert Bukhorst, who is a standing committee member and has traveled all the way across from Brazil. We have Hans-Peter Stormer, is that pronounced correctly? Stormer, who has come across from Norway. And then, I'm a committee member and haven't traveled all that far. And then I'm very, very pleased that we are joined today by a friend from many, many years ago in South Africa, whose paths crossed again completely unexpectedly in Guernsey some 30 years since I last saw her. So very welcome to you and very welcome to those people who will be joining us either live or later through the recordings. There shouldn't be a fire alarm, but if there is, then we just go straight down the stairs. So straight down these stairs, and you will eventually end up out where you came from. What I would just say is that it probably would be a good idea to stick your fingers in your ears, because the fire alarm is very loud. But hopefully we will not experience that. Also, one thing just to say is there is somebody from the Guernsey Press who is going to be arriving shortly. So he would like to take a couple of photographs. So we may just need to pause, which may very well be during Hugh's talk. So if Hugh doesn't mind just pausing briefly while the photographer does whatever. So without any ado, I'd like to pass over to Michael, and then I will share the principles welcome.
Thank you. So I'm Michael Fattorini, one of 3 trustees, and I apologise. I'm still Michael Fattorini, one of 3 trustees, and I apologise for the first 2 choices of person to welcome, Rob O'Brien, the principal, and Trevor Wakefield, who is our chairman of governors. I'm afraid you've got the poor 3rd choice, but I'm very pleased to be here. Darryl, thank you for organising the event. I have no influence over the fire alarms, I hasten to add, so if it does go off, please don't blame me. I would like to welcome you all on behalf of Blanchelande College. I know that lots of you, several of you have made sterling efforts to get here. Fortunately, the weather has been fine, which is good, and we can't always guarantee that. And I'll talk about the weather just in a minute or two. But Guernsey has been the home for many, many literary characters over the years. Some born here, some who've drifted here, and some who've just heard of Guernsey but written about it nevertheless. The likes of Len Dayton, Desmond Bagley, who write thrillers, Mervyn Peake, who writes strange books, not least of which Mr. Pye, based in Sark. Compton Mackenzie, who was famous for Whiskey Galore, that wonderful story about the wartime boat and the smuggling of the whiskey in Scotland. Children's books, Roger Hargreaves, who wrote the Mr. Men books, and Elizabeth Beresford, who wrote the Wombles books, again, all hail from here or spent time here. More currently, there is G.B. Edwards, who was born here in 1899, moved away after the First World War for a rather loose life in London and the continent. But after his death, a book that he wrote, the Book of Ebenezer Page, was published, and that to very, very high praise from people that read proper books. And last but not least, Mary Ann Schaefer. She was an American authoress who came for a day trip to Guernsey, got fogbound at the airport and discovered all the books on the occupation. Guernsey, of course, was occupied during the war from 1940 to 1945, when the Germans had one rather large package store and came and stayed for 5 years. Her book was, again, about Guernsey during that occupation period. Well worth a read if you've got the time. And then, of course, best known was Victor Hugo. He came here between 1855 and 1870. He wrote The Toilers of the Sea, which dedicated to the people he regarded as his hosts, the people of Guernsey. He also finished the libretto for that famous West End musical, Les Miserables. So Guernsey, you are not the first literary people to come to the island. I hope you're not the last literary people to come to the island. And personally, I hope that either as a group or as individuals, you'll come back again. But for now, welcome. Darryl, thank you.
So as I mentioned, the principal is very disappointed not to be able to join us today, and has recorded a welcome. He did ask me what he thought an ideal length might be, and I suggested that maybe up to 10 minutes would provide a good, focused, energetic introduction to the meeting. And he did very, very, very well to make it in 15. But the thing that is encouraging about that is what I hope will be very evident from his welcome is how seriously he has taken this meeting and the significance of this meeting.
Hello, I'm Robert O'Brien. I'm the principal of Blanchelande College, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you to this IFLA mid-year meeting. I'm sorry that I'm not with you today to welcome you in person, as I'm away for Easter, but I'm very grateful to Michael Fattorini, one of our college trustees, for giving you a tour, to Hugh Rose, our design director and the creator of our Hero's Journey mural, which you will see shortly, and also to your hosts, Darryl, Toerien, who's the Blanchelande Head of Inquiry-Based Learning, and Jenny Toerien, our Head of EPQ and Assistant Librarian. The library that most of you are sitting in right now is just a year and a half old, and therefore it's an incredible milestone for us and a cause of great pride to be hosting this as a school which is at the beginning of a library journey, an inquiry learning journey. It's amazing to think how much has been achieved in the last year and a half. For the first year, we just had the library. We didn't have a qualified librarian team, which we do now. We now have the space, the expertise, a good budget for future investment, and a burgeoning inquiry programme, which is embedding itself in the juniors, the seniors, and of course at the sixth form at the top of the school. So from where we are in our development as a school, I'm so delighted to be facilitating the work of the school's library section ahead of the launch of the manifesto and also the Global Action for Schools Library Models of Inquiry book at the IFLA 2022 World Library and Information Congress. A few observations from your manifesto that jumped out at me. The first is the phrase equitable access. One of the things I've been most touched by in my visits to the library, especially at lunchtimes, is the way that students from less financially or culturally affluent backgrounds are drawn to the library. And it's difficult for those of us who have always been surrounded by books to really appreciate what's going on inside a child who's maybe encountering that wealth for the first time, and it's wonderful to see. So equitable access is so important and a real sense, a source of mission, hopefully, for every librarian. The second, which jumped out at me, is the exclusion of ideological alongside political and religious censorship. And of course, as a Catholic school, people often have heard of things like the index of prohibited books, which existed in the church until about 60 years ago. And it seems to me that a librarian has a great responsibility and requires great moral courage to maintain the integrity of the physical and digital collection, and also to have real restraint in the librarian's own personal views, preferences and opinions, whilst also bringing a passion and a personality and an enlivening soul to the library. And that personality trait of openness is so at the heart of what a library is. It's there to broaden our awareness, to bring us into contact with books and ideas that perhaps are not innately those that we associate with, because unlike a bookshop, we're not buying the things that we necessarily like. We can experiment and dip into things and become more broad-minded in the process. And thirdly, the manifesto talks about active inquiry initiatives, and I'm so blessed at Blanchelande to be able to see those cropping up all over the year groups. Reading Darryl's blog posts has given me some awareness that your gathering is against the backdrop of a large perceived problem in librarianship and education more broadly, namely that of the superabundance of information and the complexity of the cultural and intellectual hinterland. It's one thing to have helpful books and articles by academics and experts. It's another to implement those ideas in the reality of the shifting sands and sometimes vanishing budgets of school life. The digital revolution, of course, has led to the proliferation of information. Perhaps we can appropriate T.S. Eliot's Choruses from the Rock and say, all our knowledge brings us nearer to our ignorance. That superabundance of information can make the information to knowledge journey seem and feel insuperable. Darryl makes a fascinating insight in his November 2020 blog post. Somewhat paradoxically, he writes, the very characteristics of the digital environment that facilitate inquiry also hinder inquiry. However, in a sense, as a culture, we have been here many times before. The link between the human memory and cultural capital was first broken, arguably, when those pesky Sumerians decided to make wedge-shaped figures in their clay tablets, thus inventing writing. If the invention of writing was in itself the first information revolution, it nevertheless remained possible throughout the classical and medieval period for the likes of Thomas More and Michel de Montaigne to have read everything of academic importance. But it was perhaps with the printing press and the loss of Latin as the universal language that the exponential proliferation of information has caused a real crisis in the information to knowledge journey. The digital revolution of our time simply takes it to a new level. So should this be reversed? Can we turn the clock back? Or must we go along with it? In some schools and universities, especially in the US, this Gordian knot is cut by the resort to a cultural canon of great books. While I do have some sympathy with this position, most of them are on the, or many of them are on the shelves behind me. The shelves behind me are not a library, and a library exists to offer something much broader than a selected canon. I would still say that a library in which the canon is not represented, or that has been so-called decolonised, has maybe fallen foul of the ideological censorship that the manifesto speaks against. At Blanchelande, over the last 3 years, we have engaged with the Jungian concept of the hero's journey, inspired by Hugh Rose's fantastic mural here in the Blanchelande Drama Studio. One of the classic hero's journey narratives, which hopefully is present in all of your libraries, I'm sure it is Tolkien's The Hobbit. And when I was thinking about the information to knowledge journey, I couldn't help but think of the scene where Bilbo, Thorin, and their desperate compatriots are trying to find the door on the side of the lonely mountain that will let them in to find the lost Arkenstone. In the hero's journey, we call this prize, this treasure, the boon. For all of us in education, there is no shortage or difficulty of sources of information. It is rather the distillation into knowledge and conveying the difference between information and knowledge and wisdom, which is the great challenge. That's the boon, the treasure that that door into liberal education that hopefully we're searching for. To quote Eliot again, where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge we have lost in information? The IFLA School Library Guidelines 2015 defined the school library in terms of inquiry, a school's physical and digital learning space where reading, inquiry, research, thinking, imagination and creativity are central to students' information to knowledge journey and to their personal, social and cultural growth. And the guidelines include inquiry as one of the core instructional activities that make up the school's pedagogical programme, pages 41 to 44. For me, this resonates with the outstanding classic work of liberal education, John Henry Newman's Idea of a University from the 1850s. Newman describes what he calls the imperial intellect, which is a terrifyingly imposing name for something which I think everyone should be familiar with, and it really isn't terrifying. Newman's idea of the imperial intellect is not a human encyclopedia. It is a mind in which the knowledge and methodology of the subject of human knowledge exist harmoniously with each other. It's an ideal. It's based on the epistemic principle that truth in one field does not contradict truth in another, and therefore if we had a mind, a really well-educated person who had delved into the methodology of each field, then bringing together in harmony what they had learned, and not just the knowledge that they'd learned, but the methodology, the ways of investigating, then that would be an imperial intellect, be able to survey all things, not knowing everything, but able to enter into and see the connections between the different fields of knowledge. And I know it's very bad practice to quote at length, and I'm coming to an end, but I just want to give you a little bit of what Newman says about the imperial intellect, because I think it applies to the role of a librarian. I observe then and ask you, gentlemen, to bear in mind that the philosophy of an imperial intellect is based not so much on simplification as on discrimination. Its true representative defines rather than analyses. He aims at no complete catalogue or interpretation of the subject of knowledge, but of following out as far as man can what in its fullness is mysterious and unfathomable, taking into his charge all sciences, methods, collections of facts, principles, doctrines, truths, which are the reflections of the universe upon the human intellect. He admits them all, he disregards none, and as disregarding none, he allows none to exceed or encroach. His watchword is, live and let live. He takes things as they are, he submits to them all, as far as they go. He recognises the insuperable lines of demarcation which run between subject and subject. He observes how separate truths lie relatively to each other, where they concur, where they part company, and where, being carried too far, they cease to be truths at all. It is his office to determine how much can be known in each province of thought, when we must be contented not to know, in what direction inquiry is hopeless, or, on the other hand, full of promise, where it gathers into coils insoluble by reason, where it is absorbed in mysteries, or runs into the abyss. It will be his care to be familiar with the signs of real and apparent difficulties, with the methods proper to particular subject matters, what in each particular case are the limits of rational scepticism, and what the claims of a peremptory faith. If he has one cardinal maxim, it is in his philosophy, it is that truth cannot be contrary to truth. If it has a second, it is that truth often seems contrary to truth. And if a third, it is the practical conclusion that we must be patient with such appearances and not be hasty to pronounce them to be really of a more formidable character. These words seem to summarise so much of what Blanchelande, Darryl and Jenny, as our inquiry-based learning pedagogues, are instructing us in. Finally, what is of most value to me as head is that the fossil inquiry cycle represents common sense. It is, as Chesterton defines philosophy, thought that has been thought out. My sense is that your project here, in an age when information flies by like country stations from the window of a train travelling at over 100 miles an hour, the inquiry process slows us down and shows us how to think. There is only the fight to recover what has been lost and found and lost again and again, and now under conditions that seem unpropitious. But are the times unpropitious? The wonderful thing about a school is the ability to create a culture of our own, of its own. Culture in Christopher Dawson's sense of a shared way of living and thinking. If you are able to share your Arkenstone, the boon in the hero's journey, the timing, having lived through a pandemic, when the potential and the limitation of remote online learning has been tested on a mass scale, the proposal that a library as a space integral to the learning process could never be more promising. We need physical spaces where we can gather together and learn physically alongside each other. So I hope you have a wonderful conference here at Blanchelande and at the venues that have been prepared for you, such as Victor Hugo's magnificent Hauteville House, where he wrote Les Miserables, that you will be encountering all these places on your stay. Thank you, and I wish you every success in your vocation as librarians and experts in inquiry.
So I think it will be clear that this physical library, but also the concept of a library, is really important to Rob. And that Rob, in many ways, and Michael will talk about that a little bit later, just before we go on the tour of the college, that this physical library and the concept of library that is growing out of it, in many ways wouldn't exist without Rob. And that Rob is, in a very real sense, responsible for Jenny and I being here, and by extension, responsible for you joining us here today. So what a privilege at this time. So yes, so Alison is the Chief Executive of the UK School Library Association, and our relationship goes back a long way. And more recently in terms of support for the ongoing development of FOSSIL, which is the model of the inquiry process that we use and that we will share about a little bit later on. So Alison was very much hoping to be here today. The UK School Library Association is very kindly and very generously sponsoring the dinner and the opening reception and dinner this evening at Moores Hotel. So we're very grateful to them. And yeah, Alison was very disappointed not to be able to join us, but has recorded a welcome on behalf of the UK School Library Association.
Hi, and welcome to you all. My name's Alison Tarrant, and I'm the Chief Exec of the School Library Association in the UK. I am delighted that we are able to support this gathering of international colleagues, especially in this, our 85th year. I am truly saddened not to be with you, as I know the discussions, sessions and experiences will be world class, and particularly on a personal note for me, as it would have been a homecoming for me as well. But I have had a family holiday booked since 2020, so I really was pre-booked by some way. But huge thanks to Darryl for putting this on and for inviting us to be a part of it. I know that our Vice Chair, Ali, who is with you, will do an amazing job, and do talk to her if you have any questions or if there's anything you want to know. I am proud to be an IFLA member, and I look forward to creating new links over the coming months. I hope you all have a lovely time over the next few days. And if there's anything the School Library Association in the UK can do to support your work, please do let us know. With our very best wishes, have a lovely time.